Israel's Ministry for Public Security hosted a gathering this week of top security experts and ministers from some 24 nations, all of them interested in sharing lessons from their respective struggles against terror and cybercrime. I-24 News senior defense correspondent Shai Ben-Ari asked participants whether technology could defeat ideology, and here's some of their responses.
Technology cannot only be the answer. We have education, sensitization, local population. We have all those devices. You take your phone, you can go all over the world by just looking or consulting your phone. It is good, but it could be dangerous also.
Definitely, since they are using technology like social media, Facebook, etc., we should be using technology in our best interest, you know. So it has a very important part in that, but of course there are also other means that have to be carefully deployed and developed.
So radical ideology is addressed by a concerted effort through all sorts of mechanisms: culture, information, inclusive development, ownership of all these means of survival for everybody, and because it invests in the negative aspect of life, I think we, as a concerted world, need to invest in the positive aspects of life and show people that you don't have to be a martyr by taking down people.
And from the conference in Jerusalem, I'm pleased to be joined by Professor Boaz Ganor, founder and executive director of the ICT, Israel's International Institute for Counter-Terrorism. Boaz, great to have you on the show.
Thank you for having me.
So tell us about this unique forum and the growing worldwide interest in learning from Israel's experience.
Well, we have just adjourned the third meeting of the International Forum for Homeland Security Ministries, and I have to say that this is a very important step in elaborating the international cooperation in counterterrorism. You need to bear in mind that the position of Minister of Homeland Security is quite a new position. The function of Homeland Security or Ministers of Homeland Security started only after 9/11. And then we saw many states establishing ministries of Homeland Security or public security. And they have many common problems, many common dilemmas, many common threats, and they need to meet on an annual basis, at least, in order to share the views and share the concerns, and maybe even share some of their experience and solutions. And that's what they did in this specific forum.
Your institute just published an interesting study on psychological profiles of lone wolf terrorists. Given the horrendous attacks in Paris, Barcelona, and so many other places around the world, can authorities use profiling to gain early warning of potential attacks?
Well, we are actually in the midst of concluding this very unique research, which is being headed by Professor Ariel Merari and a group of psychologists and sociologists, which are conducting interviews with jailed lone wolves. And they do it on a voluntary basis, and we are trying to understand their rationale. We are trying to understand their motivations. We are trying to understand their psychological profile. And as far as I know, this has never been done before. We have few conclusions, but it's still in the making. One of the conclusions, or one of the facts that took us almost by surprise, is that a large number of those attackers, those lone wolves, practically gave a statement over the social networks that could imply on their intentions to do something like that. When you analyze that, it makes sense, because unlike organized terrorists, those that have been recruited to a terrorist organization and have been launched to the attack by the terrorist organization, that they know that the organization, after they will be captured or killed, will transmit and publish their story, their way of seeing things, and so on and so forth. In this case, they have to give this information before they conduct the attack. And this can serve as a certain type of a warning.
Now, there's lots of concern about social media's role in the radicalization process. Israel's public security minister has called for removing Twitter and other accounts of those found to be inciting to violence. Is this the right way to tackle online radicalization? What's your view?
There is no doubt that there is a crucial need to hold hands in hands, I would say, of the internet providers, the companies of the social networks, Facebook, Twitter, and others, and intelligence agencies and governments, and I would say, as an academician, also academic centers. Practically, this is starting to be done and being initiated by those companies. We had a representative of Facebook who was responsible for counter-terrorism, and he already mentioned that this cooperation is starting. Even mentioned the fact that the Facebook is interested in working with ICT, the International Policy Institute for Counter-Terrorism, at the Interdisciplinary Center on that matter. I would say that there is another process which is also very interesting, and this is developing technologies that can do it automatically to identify radicalization in early stage over the social networks. This is another thing that we are at ICT engaged in, trying to develop this kind of algorithms that would point out that this or the other person is starting to get into this vicious cycle of radicalization.
Now, your study found that in Israel, the number of casualties from lone wolf attacks dropped dramatically since April 2016. How so? Is it better intel for preempting or policing the threat?
I think it's a combination of few elements or few processes together. It starts with the incitement. The incitement was severe at the early stage of the wave of lone wolves and declined through the years. Of course, the Israeli success to deal with this phenomenon and the methodologies, security methodologies that Israel has learned in the process, lower down the number of casualties that they are able to inflict. We had just now the Prime Minister talking about this trend, and he mentioned that as one of the most important facts, that those terrorists that are ready, by the way, most of them are ready to die during the attack, but if they die without killing others, there is no sense for that purpose. And this is another reason why we see this decline. The Prime Minister also mentioned another fact which is interesting, the importance of big data analysis. This ties us back to the social networks' role in this field.
Boaz, you're a leading, longtime expert on global jihad. Has the U.S.-led coalition operations to defeat ISIS in Iraq and Syria prompted a mass exodus to other points in this region and even beyond? And who poses the most danger these days? Groups and offshoots loyal to ISIS, those loosely connected to al-Qaeda, or Iranian-backed groups?
Well, it's a $100 million question, not the $1 million question, because many experts around the world and even security agencies are struggling with this question. It's quite clear that this is a very dangerous time because this is a transition time. What used to be is no longer the same of what is going to be in the future. ISIS has lost the territory in Syria and in Iraq. ISIS has lost what I call the hybridity nature of the organization, i.e. ISIS is no longer controlling territory and population. Therefore, his considerations are changing. His rationale is changing. His cost-benefit analysis is changing. He has other concerns in mind. And of course, his power is much less than it used to be before. But I think we would do a big mistake if we will turn a blind eye to the threat coming from ISIS and definitely to the threat coming from al-Qaeda as well. I would suggest to understand that or to look at it as if it's a balloon which is not full with air. And once you press one side of the balloon, the air sneaks into the other part of the balloon. And if you squeeze there as well, it comes in the middle, between your hands. This is a very elusive phenomenon.
Professor Ganor,